After 6 years of silence, my daughter-in-law knocked on my door. "We heard you bought a new beach house. We brought our stuff to move in with you," she said. As she walked in, the leech froze at what she saw. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the one that faces the garden window, when I heard the knock. Not the gentle tap of a neighbor or the quick rap of a delivery person, but that demanding, insistent pounding that somehow manages to shake both your door and your peace of mind. 6 years. 6 long, quiet years since I'd heard from my son Marcus or his wife Jessica. 6 years of birthdays forgotten, holidays spent alone, and phone calls that went straight to voicemail. I'd stopped trying after the 3rd year, when the silence became so deafening that even my hope finally learned to whisper. The knocking continued, growing more impatient. I set down my tea and walked slowly to the front door, my heart already racing with a mixture of dread and foolish anticipation. Through the peephole I saw them. Marcus standing slightly behind his wife, looking uncomfortable in that way he'd mastered since his marriage, while Jessica stood front and center with that smile I remembered too well, the one that never reached her eyes. But what made my breath catch weren't their faces. It were the suitcases. 4 large suitcases stacked beside them, along with what looked like boxes and bags. My stomach dropped as I realized what I was seeing. I opened the door slowly, my hands trembling slightly. "Marcus." "Hi, Mom." His voice was quiet, almost apologetic, but he didn't meet my eyes. Jessica stepped forward immediately, that bright, fake smile stretching wider. "Diane, you look wonderful. We heard you bought a new beach house." She pushed past me into my living room without waiting for an invitation, Marcus trailing behind her with their luggage. I stood there, still holding the door open, feeling like I was watching a nightmare unfold in slow motion. What are you doing here?" Jessica was already surveying my living room with those calculating eyes of hers, the same look she'd given my house when Marcus first brought her home 12 years ago. "We brought our stuff to move in with you," she announced, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "The timing is perfect, really. We just finished our lease, and when we heard about your new place." "How did you?" I stopped myself. How did they even know about the house? I hadn't told anyone in the family. I'd been so careful to keep my personal life private after years of their judgment and interference. Marcus finally spoke up, though he was looking at the floor. "Jessica's sister saw the real estate listing online. Small world, right?" "Small world. Right. More like Jessica had been keeping tabs on me all these years, probably waiting for something exactly like this. Jessica was already walking through my house like she owned it, opening doors, peering into rooms. "This is so much bigger than your old place. And right on the beach, too. You must have gotten quite a windfall to afford something like this." The way she said it made my skin crawl. There was something hungry in her voice, something that reminded me of a vulture circling overhead. I watched her run her fingers along my grandmother's antique dresser, the same dresser she'd once called outdated junk, when she was redecorating Marcus's apartment. "I didn't buy anything," I said quietly, but she wasn't listening. She was already in the kitchen, opening cabinets and examining my appliances like she was conducting an inventory. "The location alone must be worth a fortune," she continued, talking more to herself than to me. "And with property values these days." "Jessica." My voice came out sharper than I'd intended, and both she and Marcus turned to look at me. "I didn't buy this house." For the first time since she'd arrived, Jessica's smile faltered slightly. "What do you mean?" I looked at Marcus, my son who hadn't called me in 6 years but was now standing in my living room expecting to move in. "I inherited it from my sister Ruth when she passed last month." The silence that followed felt heavy and uncomfortable. Jessica's face went through several expressions in quick succession: confusion, disappointment, and then something that looked almost like anger. Marcus just looked embarrassed, which was somehow worse than Jessica's obvious disappointment. "Ruth left you a beach house?" Jessica's voice had lost some of its sweetness. "Ruth knew about my situation with the family," I said carefully. "She wanted me to have somewhere peaceful." What I didn't say was how Ruth had held my hand in the hospital during her final weeks, tears in her eyes as she listened to me explain why I spent holidays alone. How she'd made me promise to stop letting them treat me like I was disposable. How she'd changed her will specifically to ensure I'd have something that no one could take away from me. Jessica recovered quickly, that smile snapping back into place like a mask. Well, that's wonderful. Even better, really. No mortgage payments to worry about. She turned to Marcus. Honey, why don't you start bringing in the rest of our things from the car? Marcus nodded and headed back outside without a word. I watched him go, this man who used to be my little boy, who used to climb into my lap when he was scared, who used to tell me I was the best mom in the world. When had he become this stranger who couldn't even look me in the eye? So, Jessica said, settling herself onto my couch like she belonged there, we should probably talk about sleeping arrangements. The master bedroom has the best view, doesn't it? I stared at her, feeling that familiar tightness in my chest that I'd learned to associate with Jessica's presence. The same feeling I'd had at Marcus's wedding when she'd seated me at the back table with distant cousins I'd never met. The same feeling I'd had when she'd forgotten to invite me to their anniversary dinner. The same feeling I'd had when she told me, with that exact same smile, that maybe it was time I gave them some space to build their own family traditions. This is my house, Jessica. Of course it is. And we're family. She said the word like it meant something, like she hadn't spent years systematically cutting me out of their lives. Besides, you're all alone in this big place. It'll be nice to have some company, won't it? As she said it, Marcus walked back in with another load of suitcases. Behind him, I could see a moving truck pulling into my driveway. A moving truck. They hadn't just decided to visit. They hadn't just packed a few bags for a temporary stay. They had loaded up everything they owned and brought it to my door, assuming I would just, welcome them with open arms after 6 years of silence? I felt something cold settle in my stomach as I watched more men emerge from the truck, ready to unload boxes and furniture. They had planned this. Every detail of it. They had found out about the house, ended their lease, hired movers, and shown up at my door with a smile and an expectation that I would simply roll over and let them take whatever they wanted. Just like always. I think there's been a misunderstanding, I said slowly, watching Jessica's face carefully. I never invited you to move in. Her smile never wavered, but something shifted in her eyes. Something hard and calculating that I recognized from years of being on the receiving end of her manipulations. Oh, Diane, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I know this is probably overwhelming. Change is hard at your age. But we're here now and we're family. You'll get used to it. At my age. As if I were some confused elderly woman who couldn't think for herself. As if I hadn't been managing just fine on my own for the past 6 years while they pretended I didn't exist. I watched through the window as the movers started unloading furniture, and I realized with a sinking heart that Jessica wasn't asking for my permission. She was informing me of what was going to happen. And for the first time in 6 years, looking at my son who still couldn't meet my eyes and his wife who was already making herself comfortable in my sanctuary, I wondered if Ruth had been wrong about this house being somewhere no one could take away from me. Watching Jessica direct the movers like she owned the place brought back a flood of memories I'd spent 6 years trying to forget. The way she'd taken control of my life, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of the relationship I'd had with my son. It started so subtly that I didn't even notice at first. When Marcus brought Jessica home for the first time, she seemed sweet enough. A little possessive maybe, but I told myself that was normal for a young woman in love. She'd smile and nod when I talked, ask polite questions about my work, compliment my cooking. I actually thought we might become close. The first red flag should have been Thanksgiving, just 3 months after they started dating. I'd spent days preparing Marcus's favorite meal, the same menu I'd made every year since he was little. But an hour before dinner, Jessica called. I'm so sorry, Diane, she'd said, her voice thick with fake regret. I'm having a panic attack. I don't think I can handle a big family gathering right now. Marcus is staying with me to make sure I'm okay. I'd looked at the table I'd set for 12, at the turkey I'd been basting since dawn, at the pumpkin pie cooling on the counter. Maybe I could bring some food over? Or we could do a smaller dinner, just the 3 of us. That's so sweet of you, but I really just need quiet today. Maybe next year. Next year came and there was another emergency. A work crisis. A friend's wedding. A migraine. There was always something, and Marcus always chose her over our family traditions. I started to see the pattern, but I kept making excuses. She was young. She was stressed. She'd come around. The worst part was how she made it look like my fault. At Marcus's birthday party the year before they got engaged, she'd planned the entire thing without telling me. I showed up with a homemade cake, the same chocolate cake I'd made for his birthday every year since he was 6, only to find an elaborate store-bought cake already on the table. "Oh, Diane," Jessica had said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You didn't need to bring anything. I told Marcus to call you and let you know we had everything covered." Marcus had looked uncomfortable but said nothing. He never said anything when Jessica made me look foolish or pushy, or like I was overstepping boundaries I didn't even know existed. But it was their wedding that really showed me who Jessica was and what she was capable of. I should have known something was wrong when I didn't get invited to any of the wedding planning. No dress shopping, no cake tasting, no venue visits. When I asked Marcus about it, he just said Jessica wanted to handle everything herself, that she was very particular about her vision. The morning of the wedding, I got ready carefully. I'd bought a beautiful navy dress, nothing too flashy, nothing that would upstage the bride. I'd had my hair done professionally for the first time in years. I was so proud of my son, so happy to see him starting his new life. When I arrived at the church, the usher looked at his seating chart with confusion. "Diane Carver? Let me double-check." He walked me down the aisle, past the front rows where Jessica's family was seated, past the second and third rows filled with their friends, all the way to the back of the church. The very last row, next to people I'd never met in my life. I sat there during the ceremony, watching my son promise his life to a woman who had seated his mother behind strangers, and I felt something break inside me. Not just hurt, but a kind of deep, bone-deep understanding that this was intentional. This was Jessica showing everyone exactly where I ranked in their new family structure. After the ceremony, I tried to find Marcus to congratulate him, but he was swept away in a crowd of photographers and well-wishers. Every time I got close, Jessica would appear and guide him away to meet someone important, or pose for another picture. At the reception, I was seated at a table in the far corner with Jessica's elderly great-aunt who had dementia and a couple who spent the entire evening arguing about their divorce. I watched from across the room as Jessica laughed and danced with her family, as Marcus gave a toast thanking everyone who helped make this day special, without mentioning me once. I left before the cake cutting. No one noticed. The isolation happened gradually after that. Phone calls that went unreturned for days, then weeks. Invitations that came last minute or not at all. Holidays where I was told the plans had changed, usually after I'd already prepared food or bought gifts. The worst was probably Christmas 3 years into their marriage. I'd called in November to ask about dinner plans, wanting to coordinate with Jessica's family if needed. Jessica told me they were having a small, intimate celebration, and that they'd love to see me sometime during the holidays, but not on Christmas Day itself. I spent Christmas alone as I had the year before and the year before that. But that evening Marcus posted photos on social media. Their small, intimate celebration included Jessica's parents, her siblings, her cousins, and about 20 other people I'd never seen before. There were pictures of an elaborate feast, of gift exchanges, of everyone laughing around the Christmas tree. Everyone except me. When I called Marcus the next day, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice, he seemed genuinely confused. "I thought you knew it was just immediate family, Mom." "I am your immediate family. You know what I mean." But I didn't know what he meant. I didn't understand how I'd gone from being the most important person in his life to someone who didn't qualify as immediate family. I didn't understand how the boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms had grown into a man who could exclude his mother from Christmas without a second thought. The final straw came on my 60th birthday. I didn't expect a party, but I thought surely Marcus would call. Maybe they'd take me to dinner, or at least acknowledge the day somehow. Instead, I got a text message at 9 p.m. "Happy birthday, Mom. Sorry we missed it. Crazy day." That night, I saw more photos on social media. Jessica had thrown herself an elaborate pre-birthday celebration, the same day, complete with flowers and champagne and a whole crowd of friends singing to her. Her birthday wasn't for another 2 weeks. The message was clear. Jessica's pre-birthday party was more important than my actual birthday. Her friend's time was more valuable than her husband's relationship with his mother. I tried talking to Marcus about it once, about 6 months before they cut me off completely. I called and asked if we could meet for coffee, just the two of us. He'd seemed reluctant but agreed. I feel like I'm losing you, I told him, trying to keep my voice steady. It's like Jessica doesn't want me around. He'd gotten defensive immediately. Jessica isn't the problem, Mom. Maybe you just need to try harder to fit in with how things are now. We're not kids anymore. I never said you were kids. I just miss my son. You see me. I see you when Jessica allows it. And even then, you're different. You're distant. He'd looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with his coffee cup. Things change when you get married, Mom. Your spouse comes first. That's how it's supposed to work. I'm not asking to come first. I'm just asking not to be forgotten. But even as I said it, I could see it wasn't getting through to him. Jessica had done her work too well. She'd convinced him that my desire to maintain our relationship was somehow inappropriate, that my hurt feelings were manipulative, that choosing his wife meant abandoning his mother. 3 weeks after that conversation, I called to invite them for Sunday dinner. Jessica answered Marcus's phone. Diane, she'd said, her voice sickeningly sweet. I think it's time we were honest with each other. Your behavior has been really concerning lately. The constant calls, the guilt trips, the way you try to come between Marcus and me. It's not healthy. I'd been so shocked I could barely speak. I'm not trying to come between anyone. I think you need to take some time to work on yourself. Maybe see someone about these attachment issues. When you're ready to respect our boundaries and our marriage, we can talk about rebuilding this relationship in a healthier way. Then she hung up. And that was it. 6 years of silence began with Jessica telling me I needed therapy for wanting to maintain a relationship with my own son. Now, watching her walk through my house like she owned it, directing movers to put her furniture in my living room, I realized nothing had changed. Jessica still saw me as an obstacle to be managed, a problem to be solved. The only difference was that now she needed something from me. The question was, what did she really want? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? By evening, Jessica had completely taken over my house. Her furniture was scattered throughout my living room. Her boxes were stacked in what she'd already claimed as their bedroom, and she was in my kitchen making dinner like she'd lived there for years instead of hours. I sat at my own kitchen table feeling like a stranger in my own home, watching her move around with that proprietary confidence she'd always had. She'd changed into comfortable clothes and pulled her hair back, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her since she arrived. This was Jessica in her element. In control, rearranging someone else's life to suit her needs. This kitchen is actually pretty well equipped, she said, opening my spice cabinet and examining the contents. Though we'll need to reorganize everything. I have a system that works much better than this random arrangement you have going on. Marcus sat across from me at the table, scrolling through his phone. He'd barely said 10 words to me since they'd arrived, and when he did speak, it was to agree with whatever Jessica was saying. Watching him now, I tried to find traces of the boy I'd raised, but he seemed like a completely different person. So Diane, Jessica continued, pulling ingredients out of my refrigerator without asking. Marcus and I were talking, and we think it would be good to get this place appraised. You know, for insurance purposes. I looked up from my untouched glass of wine. Insurance purposes? Well, you need to make sure you have adequate coverage on a property like this. And of course, it's always good to know what your assets are worth. She smiled that bright, fake smile again. Property values have gone through the roof in beach areas lately. You could be sitting on a gold mine and not even know it. The way she said it made something cold settle in my stomach. There was that hunger in her voice again, that calculating tone that always appeared when Jessica was working an angle. I'm not planning to sell, I said quietly. Of course not. Jessica laughed, but it sounded forced. Although you have to admit, this place is awfully big for one person. And maintaining a beach house can be so expensive. The salt air, the constant repairs, the property taxes. She trailed off, letting the implications hang in the air. Marcus finally looked up from his phone. What Jessica means is that we want to help you manage the property. Take some of the burden off your shoulders. Help me manage. Right. The same way Jessica had helped me manage my relationship with my son by cutting me out of his life entirely. That's very thoughtful, I said carefully. But I'm managing just fine. Jessica's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Are you though? I mean, no offense, but you're 62 years old. Living alone in a big house like this, dealing with maintenance and upkeep. It's a lot for someone your age. Someone my age. There it was again, that condescending tone that made me feel like a confused old woman who couldn't take care of herself. The same tone she'd used earlier when she told me I'd get used to them moving in without my permission. I may be 62, but I'm perfectly capable of taking care of my own home. Of course you are, Marcus said quickly, shooting a warning look at his wife. We just want to help. But Jessica wasn't backing down. She set down the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables and turned to face me directly. Diane, can I be honest with you? Nothing good ever came after Jessica asked if she could be honest. We heard about this house from my sister, like Marcus said, but what we also heard is that you've been struggling since you retired. Living alone, not really taking care of yourself the way you should. We've been worried about you. I stared at her, feeling that familiar tightness in my chest. Struggling? Who told you I was struggling? It doesn't matter who, she said, waving her hand dismissively. The point is, we're here now. We can help you take care of this place. Make sure you're not overwhelmed by it all. The audacity of it took my breath away. For 6 years they'd acted like I didn't exist. No phone calls, no visits, no acknowledgement of birthdays or holidays. And now they were claiming they'd been worried about me? If you were so worried, why didn't you call? Why didn't you visit? Jessica's expression shifted to one of exaggerated patience, like she was talking to a difficult child. We wanted to give you space to work through your issues. But when we heard about the house, we realized maybe isolation wasn't the best thing for you after all. My issues. She was rewriting history again, making my hurt at being excluded sound like some kind of mental health problem that required their intervention. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. What exactly did your sister tell you about this house? For the first time since she'd arrived, Jessica looked slightly uncomfortable. Just that you'd come into some property. Valuable property. And based on that, you decided to pack up all your belongings and move in with me? We decided to come help family, Marcus interjected, but his voice lacked conviction. I studied his face, looking for some sign of the son I'd raised, the boy who used to be honest with me about everything. Marcus, do you even know how I got this house? He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. You said Aunt Ruth left it to you. Do you know why she left it to me? Another uncomfortable shift. Because you were close? I almost laughed. Ruth and I hadn't been particularly close until the last few years of her life. We'd reconnected after she reached out following her cancer diagnosis, wanting to make peace with family members she'd grown distant from. She left it to me because she knew about you, I said quietly, looking directly at Marcus. She knew how you'd cut me out of your life. She knew I spent holidays alone, birthdays alone. She knew that my own son had decided I wasn't worth his time anymore. Marcus flinched, but Jessica stepped in smoothly. Diane, that's not fair. You know the situation was complicated. Complicated how? You were having boundary issues. We needed space to build our marriage without interference. Interference. That's what she called my attempts to maintain a relationship with my son. Interference. Ruth used to call me every few weeks, I continued, ignoring Jessica's interruption. She'd ask how you were doing, Marcus, and I'd have to tell her I didn't know. That my own son was a stranger to me. That his wife had decided I was too much trouble to deal with. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of something sizzling on the stove. Jessica had turned back to her cooking, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She left me this house, I said slowly, because she wanted me to have somewhere that was mine. Somewhere I could be happy without having to beg for crumbs of affection from people who were supposed to love me. Marcus was staring at his hands now, and for a moment I thought I might be getting through to him. But then Jessica turned around with a plate of food and that bright smile back in place. Well, that was very thoughtful of Ruth, she said, setting the plate in front of Marcus like nothing had happened. And it all worked out perfectly, didn't it? Now we can all be together like a real family. Like a real family. The words hit me like a slap. For 6 years, I hadn't been considered part of their real family. But now that I had something they wanted, suddenly I qualified for inclusion again. I watched Jessica serve herself and sit down at my kitchen table, already making plans for their bedroom and discussing which of my furniture would need to be moved to make room for theirs. She talked about paint colors and window treatments like this was her house, like I was just some elderly relative they were graciously caring for. And Marcus sat there nodding along, occasionally offering his own suggestions, acting like this was all perfectly normal. Like showing up at your estranged mother's house with a moving truck was just another day in family relations. But what bothered me most wasn't their presumption or their entitlement. It was the calculation behind it all. They hadn't come here out of love or concern or even guilt. They'd come here because they'd heard I had something valuable, and they wanted their piece of it. Jessica's sister hadn't just happened to see a real estate listing. Someone had been keeping tabs on me, watching for opportunities. And the moment they'd learned about the house, they'd seen their chance. The question that kept nagging at me was simple. If they thought I'd bought this house, where did they think I'd gotten the money? I'd been retired for 3 years, living on a modest pension. How did they imagine I could afford beachfront property? Unless they didn't think I'd bought it at all. Unless they'd heard something else entirely. I looked at Jessica, really looked at her, studying her face as she chatted about their plans for my house. There was something she wasn't telling me, something beyond just wanting a free place to live. And I had the sinking feeling that whatever it was going to be much worse than I'd imagined. I barely slept that first night. How could I, with strangers in my house? Because that's what they were really. Strangers who happened to share my DNA and my last name, but who had become completely foreign to me over the years of silence and manipulation. Their voices drifted through the thin walls as they settled into what used to be my guest bedroom. Jessica's voice was animated, excited even, as she discussed her plans for redecorating. Marcus's responses were quieter, but I could hear him agreeing with whatever she suggested. We should probably start with the living room, Jessica was saying. That old furniture of hers has got to go. And those family photos everywhere. It's like a museum in here. Those family photos. Pictures of Marcus as a baby, as a toddler, as a young boy. Pictures of the two of us at his school events, his birthday parties, our family vacations. The visual history of a relationship that Jessica had systematically destroyed. I got up early the next morning and made coffee, hoping to have a few quiet moments before they woke up. But Jessica was already in my kitchen, rummaging through my cabinets like she owned the place. "Morning, Diane," she said cheerfully. "I hope you don't mind, I reorganized your spice rack. It was driving me crazy having everything so disorganized." I looked at my spice rack, the one I'd organized exactly the way I liked it, with everything arranged alphabetically so I could find what I needed quickly. Now it was organized by Jessica's mysterious system, which seemed to involve grouping things by color rather than any logical order. "I had it organized," I said quietly. "Well, now it's organized properly," she replied, not even looking up from whatever she was doing to my coffee maker. "Trust me, this way makes much more sense." This was how it started. Small changes, little reorganizations, tiny improvements that weren't improvements at all. Jessica moved my coffee mugs to a different cabinet, because the one I used was better suited for dishes. She rearranged my furniture so it had better flow, which mainly meant pushing my favorite reading chair into a corner where it blocked the window. "The living room looks so much more spacious now," she announced after spending the morning moving things around. "Don't you think, honey?" Marcus, who was sitting on my couch reading his phone, barely looked up. "Yeah, looks good." He didn't even glance around the room. He had no idea what she'd changed or whether it looked better or worse. He just automatically agreed with whatever his wife said, the way he'd been trained to do. But it was when I found Jessica going through my photo albums that something snapped inside me. I walked into the living room to find her sitting on my couch with 3 of my photo albums spread out on the coffee table. She was methodically removing pictures, creating 2 piles, one to keep and one to discard. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharper than I'd intended. She looked up with that innocent expression she'd perfected. "Oh, I'm just helping organize these. You have so many photos and half of them are duplicates or blurry. I thought I'd help you sort through them." I looked at the discard pile and felt my heart sink. Pictures of Marcus's childhood, photos from family trips, candid shots of the 2 of us together. All the visual evidence of our relationship before Jessica came along. "Those aren't yours to sort," I said, reaching for the albums. Jessica pulled them away from me. "Diane, be reasonable. You can't keep every single photo you've ever taken. Besides, look at this one." She held up a picture of Marcus and me at his high school graduation. It's not even a good shot. Marcus is looking away from the camera. It wasn't a perfect photo, but it was one of my favorites. Marcus had been embarrassed about something, probably his proud mother taking too many pictures, and he was laughing while trying to duck away from the camera. It captured something real, something spontaneous and loving. That's one of my favorite pictures. But why? It's not even flattering to either of you. Because it showed us happy together. Because it captured a moment when he was still my son, before she came along and convinced him that loving his mother was somehow inappropriate. I reached for the photo, but Jessica held it away from me. Honestly, Diane, you need to let go of the past. Marcus isn't a little boy anymore. Keeping all these childhood photos around is just sad. Sad. She thought my love for my son was sad. Those are my memories. And now you can focus on making new memories with all of us together. She smiled brightly and tossed the graduation photo onto the discard pile. That's when I realized what she was really doing. This wasn't about organizing photos or decluttering. This was about erasing me. Erasing the evidence of my relationship with Marcus, rewriting our family history to start from the moment she entered the picture. I watched her continue sorting through my memories, casually discarding moments that meant everything to me but nothing to her. A photo of Marcus's first day of kindergarten. Gone. A picture of him building sandcastles with me on a family vacation. Discarded. A snapshot of him helping me bake Christmas cookies when he was 8. Into the trash pile. You know what? Jessica said, holding up another photo. We should really get Marcus to go through these with us. Help decide which ones are worth keeping. The idea of Marcus sitting here, looking at pictures of our life together and agreeing with his wife that they weren't worth keeping, made me feel physically sick. No, I said firmly. Jessica looked surprised. No. Those are my photos. My memories. You don't get to decide what's worth keeping. Her mask slipped for just a second, and I saw something cold flash in her eyes. But then the smile was back, brighter than ever. Of course they're your memories, Diane. I'm just trying to help you organize them better. But if you want to keep living in the past instead of focusing on the future. She shrugged and started gathering up the photos. It's your choice. Living in the past. That's what she called remembering my son's childhood. That's what she called treasuring the evidence of our relationship before she destroyed it. I spent the rest of the day watching Jessica systematically take over my house. She moved my books to make room for hers. She replaced my kitchen towels with ones that matched better. She even threw away a small ceramic vase that had been a Mother's Day gift from Marcus when he was 12, claiming it was chipped and ugly. Every change was presented as an improvement. Every erasure of my presence in my own home was framed as helping me become more organized, more modern, more in touch with how things should be done. And Marcus said nothing. He sat in whatever corner Jessica had designated for him and agreed with whatever she decided. When she asked his opinion about moving my grandmother's rocking chair to the garage because it didn't fit the aesthetic, he just nodded. Mom doesn't really need it taking up space in the living room, he said, not even looking at the chair where I'd rocked him to sleep as a baby. That evening, as I sat in my relocated reading chair in the corner where I could barely see out the window, Jessica announced her plans for the next day. I thought we'd go into town and look at some new furniture, she said, curled up on my couch like she belonged there. This place needs some updating if we're all going to live here comfortably. All going to live here. She was already talking about this arrangement like it was permanent, like my house had become their house simply because they decided it had. I like my furniture, I said quietly. Oh, Diane, Jessica laughed. This stuff is so dated. And most of it doesn't even match. We need to create a cohesive look. Something that feels more like a home and less like a garage sale. My furniture had been collected over decades. Each piece had a story, a memory, a reason I'd chosen it. The coffee table Marcus had helped me refinish when he was in high school. The bookshelf we'd built together one weekend when he was home from college. The dining room set that had belonged to my parents. But to Jessica, it was just old junk that didn't match her vision of how things should look. I went to bed that night feeling like I was disappearing in my own home. Every trace of my life, my history, my relationship with my son was being systematically erased and replaced with Jessica's version of how things should be. And the most heartbreaking part was that Marcus was letting it happen. More than letting it happen, he was actively participating in it. The son I'd raised to be kind and thoughtful and respectful was sitting by while his wife dismantled everything we'd built together. Lying in my bed, listening to them make plans for my house in the next room, I realized that this wasn't just about them needing a place to live. This was something much more calculated, much more cruel. This was Jessica's final victory. After years of slowly separating Marcus from me, after successfully convincing him that I was the problem in our relationship, she was now going to take the very last thing I had left. Not just my house but my sense of self, my memories, my place in my own life. And I was supposed to be grateful for it, because she was helping me and we were family. But as I lay there in the dark, something began to shift inside me. A spark of the anger I'd been suppressing for 6 years. A flicker of the fight I'd thought was gone forever. Jessica had made one crucial mistake in her calculations. She assumed I was still the same woman who had let herself be slowly erased from her son's life without fighting back. She assumed I was still the mother who would accept any crumb of attention, any scrap of inclusion, no matter how humiliating the terms. She was wrong. The third morning of their invasion, I woke up to find Jessica in my study, going through my desk drawers. She didn't even look embarrassed when I caught her. Instead, she smiled that bright, fake smile and held up a stack of my personal papers. I was looking for a pen and couldn't help but notice all these important documents just scattered around, she said, waving my bank statements and insurance papers in the air. You really should keep these organized properly. Identity theft is such a problem these days. I felt a chill run down my spine. Those weren't scattered around. They'd been neatly filed in my desk drawer, which she'd had to deliberately open and search through to find them. Those are private, I said, reaching for the papers. She handed them over, but not before I saw her eyes quickly scanning the contents. Of course they are. That's exactly why they need to be properly secured. You should really consider getting a safe deposit box for things like this. There was something in her tone, something calculating that made my stomach turn. She'd been looking for something specific, and from the satisfied look in her eyes, I was afraid she'd found it. Later that morning while Jessica was in town, picking up a few things to make the house more comfortable, Marcus approached me in the kitchen. He looked nervous, fidgeting with his coffee cup and avoiding my eyes. Mom, we need to talk about something, he said quietly. I set down my own coffee and waited, dreading whatever Jessica had put him up to saying. It's about the house, he continued. Jessica's been thinking and she's right, this place is a lot for you to handle on your own. The maintenance, the utilities, the property taxes. I'm managing fine, Marcus. Are you though? He finally looked at me, and I saw something that looked almost like concern in his eyes. Almost. When's the last time you had the roof checked? Or the plumbing inspected? Beach houses need constant upkeep, Mom. One major repair could wipe out your savings. I studied his face, looking for some sign that these were his own concerns and not Jessica's words coming out of his mouth. But I could see the rehearsed quality in his speech, the way he was hitting talking points rather than speaking from the heart. What exactly are you suggesting? He took a deep breath. We think it would be better for everyone if we made this arrangement official. Legal. That way we can help with the expenses, take some of the burden off your shoulders. Legal. The word hung in the air between us like a threat. What kind of legal arrangement? Nothing complicated. Just, maybe we could be added to the deed as co-owners. That way we'd all be invested in taking care of the place, and you wouldn't have to worry about the financial responsibility falling entirely on you. I stared at him, feeling like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. They wanted to be added to the deed of my house. The house Ruth had specifically left to me, the one thing I had that was truly mine. This is Jessica's idea, isn't it? Marcus's jaw tightened defensively. We discussed it together. She's just trying to look out for your best interests. Jessica's best interests, more like. I could see the whole plan now, laid out as clearly as if she'd drawn me a diagram. Move in under the guise of helping me. Take over my space gradually. Then convince me to sign over partial ownership for my own good. And once their names were on the deed, I need to think about it, I said carefully. Of course, Marcus said. But there was something in his voice that suggested my thinking time was limited. Just don't take too long. These kinds of arrangements work better when they're handled quickly, before any complications arise. Complications? What kind of complications could arise from me continuing to own my own house? That afternoon, while Marcus was out running errands for Jessica, I decided to do some investigating of my own. If they were planning something involving my house, there might be evidence of it somewhere. I started with Jessica's purse, which she'd left sitting on my kitchen counter. I felt guilty going through someone else's personal belongings, but the guilt was outweighed by the growing certainty that something was very wrong with their sudden appearance in my life. I found her phone tucked into a side pocket. It was locked, of course, but as I was putting it back, it buzzed with a text message that appeared on the screen. "Any luck with the old lady yet? Time is running out." My blood ran cold. The old lady. That's what someone was calling me in text messages to my daughter-in-law. I quickly memorized the number and put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. Over the next hour, I went through their belongings systematically. In Marcus's laptop bag, I found a folder labeled Mom's House, with printed articles about elder law, and something called Financial Exploitation of Seniors. There were also printouts about establishing incompetency and power of attorney procedures. My hands were shaking as I read through the documents. They weren't just planning to get their names added to my deed. They were researching ways to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could take control of my finances entirely. But it was what I found in Jessica's suitcase that made my heart stop completely. Tucked between her clothes was a manila folder containing copies of my personal documents, the same ones she'd been organizing from my desk. My bank statements, insurance policies, and most chillingly, a copy of Ruth's will. But there were also documents I'd never seen before. Legal papers with official letterheads. A petition for guardianship with my name on it, partially filled out. A document titled Assessment of Mental Capacity, with checkboxes next to symptoms like memory loss, confusion, and inability to manage finances. And at the bottom of the folder, a business card for a lawyer who specialized in elder care transitions. I sat there on the floor of my own guest bedroom, surrounded by evidence of a conspiracy against me, and felt something break inside my chest. This wasn't just about wanting a free place to live. This was about stealing everything I had. They weren't here because they cared about me or worried about my well-being. They were here because someone, probably that mysterious texter, had told them I was vulnerable. An elderly woman living alone with valuable property, and no one to protect her. The phone buzzed again from Jessica's purse in the kitchen. I crept back out and checked the message. "She's starting to ask questions. We need to move faster. Can't afford to let her figure it out." Another message followed immediately. "Remember, once you establish the pattern of confusion, the rest is easy. Judges almost always side with concerned family members." Pattern of confusion. They were planning to create evidence that I was mentally incompetent. All those little comments about my age, about things being overwhelming for someone in my position, about me needing help managing my own life, it was all building towards something. I thought about Marcus asking me to make the arrangement legal, and realized it wasn't a suggestion. It was the beginning of their endgame. They wanted me to sign papers willingly, but if I refused, they had a backup plan. They would claim I was confused, unable to make sound decisions. They'd point to my disorganized house, my scattered important documents, my inappropriate attachment to old photos and memories. They'd paint a picture of a declining elderly woman who needed someone to step in and take control. And once they had legal guardianship or power of attorney, everything would be theirs. The house, my savings, my insurance policies. Everything Ruth had left me to ensure I'd be secure and independent would be transferred to them. The cruelest part was that they were using my love for Marcus against me. They knew I'd want to believe that my son cared about my well-being, that his concern was genuine. They were counting on me to trust him, to sign whatever papers he put in front of me because I wanted so desperately to believe he still loved me. As I put everything back exactly where I'd found it, my mind raced with the implications. How long had they been planning this? Had Marcus been in on it from the beginning, or had Jessica convinced him this was really in my best interests? Either way, it didn't matter. The son I'd raised, the boy I'd loved and sacrificed for, was now part of a plan to steal everything I had and lock me away somewhere I couldn't interfere with their new life. I went to my bedroom and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my hands. They were steadier than I'd expected. 6 years ago, discovering something like this would have devastated me. I would have cried, begged, tried to reason with them. But 6 years of silence had taught me something valuable. I'd learned that some people are capable of cruelties you can't imagine, and sometimes those people share your blood. I'd also learned that I was stronger than I'd ever thought possible. Strong enough to survive being abandoned by my own son. Strong enough to build a new life without them. Strong enough to protect myself when no one else would. That evening, Jessica returned with shopping bags full of new decorations for our house. She was in an especially good mood, humming as she unpacked throw pillows and picture frames that would replace the outdated items she'd been criticizing. I found the most beautiful curtains for the living room, she announced. They're going to completely transform the space. As she chattered about her plans, I watched her carefully. This woman who was plotting to steal my home, my independence, my very identity, was standing in my kitchen acting like she was doing me a favor. "Oh, and Marcus," she said, turning to her husband, "did you remember to make that appointment we discussed?" Marcus glanced at me nervously. "Tomorrow afternoon." "What appointment?" "With the lawyer whose card I'd found in Jessica's folder? With a doctor who would assess my mental capacity based on lies they'd prepared?" "Perfect," Jessica said, then looked at me with that bright, poisonous smile. "Diane, we're going to take such good care of you. You won't have to worry about anything ever again." She was right about one thing. After tomorrow, I wouldn't have to worry about anything. Because tonight I was going to disappear. I woke up before dawn and moved through my house like a ghost, gathering the few things that truly mattered to me. My grandmother's jewelry, hidden in a box they hadn't found yet. The original deed to the house, which I'd kept in a safe deposit box they knew nothing about. A small photo album containing my real treasures, the pictures Jessica had tried to throw away. By 6 a.m., I was dressed and sitting in my car with a single suitcase, watching my house in the rearview mirror. Jessica and Marcus wouldn't be awake for hours. They'd gotten comfortable, confident in their plan, secure in the knowledge that they were dealing with a confused old woman who wouldn't fight back. They were about to learn how wrong they were. My first stop was the bank, where I'd been a customer for over 20 years. The manager, Helen, greeted me with the warm smile of someone who'd helped me through my divorce, my retirement, and countless other life changes. "Diane, what brings you in so early?" "I need to make some changes to my accounts," I said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "And I need to discuss some concerns about potential fraud." Helen's expression grew serious as I explained the situation. I showed her copies of the documents I'd found, told her about the mysterious text messages, described their plans to have me declared incompetent. "They're going to try to gain access to my accounts," I said, "probably through some kind of power of attorney or guardianship claim. I need to make sure that can't happen." Helen nodded grimly. "We see this more often than people realize. Adult children who view their parents as assets to be managed rather than people to be respected." She pulled out several forms. "Let's get your accounts protected immediately." By the time I left the bank, every account I owned was flagged against fraudulent access. New passwords, new security questions, new emergency contacts. Jessica and Marcus would find themselves hitting a brick wall if they tried to touch my money. My next stop was the courthouse, where I filed a formal complaint about the attempted elder fraud. The clerk who helped me was a young woman who reminded me of myself at that age, determined, thorough, unwilling to let injustice slide. "Do you have somewhere safe to stay?" she asked after reviewing my documentation. "Yes," I said. "Somewhere they'll never think to look." The truth was, I'd been thinking about this moment for months without realizing it. Ever since Ruth died and left me the house, I'd been subconsciously preparing for the day when Jessica and Marcus would come back into my life wanting something. I had a plan, and it was better than anything they could have imagined. At 10 a.m., while they were probably just waking up and wondering where I'd gone, I was sitting in a lawyer's office across town. Not the elder law specialist whose card Jessica carried, but a sharp young attorney who specialized in property law and had no patience for people who tried to exploit vulnerable adults. "The house was left to you specifically," she confirmed, reviewing Ruth's will. "Your sister was very clear about her intentions. She even included language specifically preventing anyone from challenging your ownership or claiming you're unfit to manage the property." I smiled, remembering Ruth's final weeks, when she'd insisted on reviewing every word of her will with her attorney. At the time I thought she was being overly cautious. Now I realize she'd been protecting me from something she'd seen coming long before I did. What I want to do, I told the lawyer, is transfer the house into an irrevocable trust, with very specific terms about who can and cannot benefit from it. She raised an eyebrow. That's unusually aggressive for most family situations. This isn't most family situations. By noon the paperwork was filed. The house now belonged to a trust that I controlled but couldn't be forced to dissolve. Even if someone convinced a court I was mentally incompetent, Jessica and Marcus would never be able to touch it, no matter what legal maneuvers they attempted. But I wasn't finished yet. My phone had been buzzing all morning with increasingly frantic calls and texts. First from Marcus, then from Jessica, then from numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored them all until I was ready to respond on my own terms. At 2 p.m., I sent a single text message to Marcus. Meet me at Rosewood Cafe at 4. Come alone or don't come at all. He was already there when I arrived, looking haggard and worried in a way I hadn't seen since he was a child. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy for the boy I'd raised. But then I remembered the documents I'd found, the text messages, the casual way he discussed adding his name to my deed, and the sympathy faded. Mom, thank God, he said, standing up as I approached the table. We were so worried. You just disappeared without saying anything. Jessica thought maybe you'd had some kind of episode. Sit down, Marcus. Something in my tone must have warned him that this wasn't going to be the conversation he'd expected. He sat slowly, his eyes searching my face. I know what you're planning, I said simply. The color drained from his face. What do you mean? The guardianship petition. The mental competency evaluation. The plan to have me declared unable to manage my own affairs, so you can take control of my house and my money. He opened his mouth to deny it, but I held up my hand. I found the documents, Marcus. I saw the text messages on Jessica's phone. I know about the lawyer, the timeline, all of it. For a long moment he said nothing. Then slowly, his shoulders sagged in defeat. Mom, it's not what you think. Then explain it to me. He rubbed his face with both hands, looking older than his 34 years. We're in trouble, Mom. Bad trouble. Jessica made some investments that went wrong and we owe people money. Dangerous people. I felt a chill run through me. How much money? More than we can pay. A lot more. When we heard about the house, Jessica thought. She thought maybe if we could get control of it we could mortgage it or sell it and pay off the debt. So you decided to have me declared mentally incompetent. That was Jessica's idea, he said quickly. I told her it was wrong, but she said it was the only way. She said we were protecting you from making bad decisions with your money. What bad decisions, Marcus? I've been managing my finances perfectly well for 62 years. He couldn't meet my eyes. She said older people sometimes get confused about things. Make mistakes. I stared at this man who used to be my son, trying to find some trace of the boy I'd raised to be honest and kind. Do you really believe I'm confused, Marcus? Do you really think I need you to protect me from myself? A long silence. Then quietly. No. But you went along with it anyway. I didn't know what else to do. These people, Mom, they're not the kind you can negotiate with. If we don't pay them back, then you should have come to me honestly. You should have asked for help instead of trying to steal everything I own. Would you have helped us? The question hung in the air between us. Would I have helped them? After 6 years of silence, after being cut out of their lives so completely that I might as well have been dead to them? I don't know, I said honestly. But you'll never know now, will you? Because instead of treating me like someone who might care about you, you treated me like a mark to be conned. Tears were running down his face now, and for a moment he looked like the little boy who used to crawl into my lap when he was scared. Mom, I'm sorry. I know we messed up, but we can fix this. We can make it right. I reached across the table and took his hand, feeling how cold his fingers were. Marcus, listen to me very carefully. The house is gone. His eyes widened. What do you mean gone? I mean I've transferred it into a trust that you and Jessica can never touch. Even if something happens to me, even if I die tomorrow, you'll never see a penny from that property. He stared at me in shock. You can't. That's not. Mom, we need that money. No, you needed honesty. You needed to come to me like an adult and ask for help. Instead, you tried to manipulate me, lie to me, and steal from me. Those were your choices. But the people we owe money to are your problem to solve, not mine. I stood up, leaving money on the table for my untouched coffee. Marcus looked up at me with desperate eyes. What am I supposed to tell Jessica? Tell her that the confused old lady was smarter than she thought. I walked away from him then, out of the cafe and into the afternoon sunshine. Behind me, I could hear him calling my name, but I didn't turn around. That part of my life was over. 6 months later, I was sitting on the deck of a small cottage I'd rented in Oregon, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and pink. The house in California had been sold. I decided I didn't want to live with the memories of their invasion, and the money from the sale, combined with Ruth's inheritance, had given me enough to live comfortably wherever I chose. I chose in peace. My phone rang and I glanced at the caller ID. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer it. Diane. The voice was tentative, younger than I'd expected. Yes. This is Sarah. I'm Marcus's daughter. My granddaughter. The child I'd never been allowed to meet, whose existence had been kept from me like a state secret. I found your number in my dad's phone, she continued. I wanted to talk to you. If that's okay. I closed my eyes, feeling something shift in my chest. I'd like that very much. My parents are getting divorced, she said quietly. Dad told me what happened with the house, with everything. He said he was wrong to cut you out of our lives. How old are you, Sarah? 15. I know that's young, but I'm old enough to make my own decisions about who I want in my life. And I want to know my grandmother. I wiped away tears I hadn't realized were falling. I want to know you too. We talked for over an hour. This granddaughter I'd never met but who had somehow found me anyway. She told me about school, about her friends, about the art classes she was taking. She asked me about my life, about the house by the ocean, about what it was like to start over at my age. When we finally hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness and smiled. Jessica had succeeded in destroying my relationship with Marcus, had turned him into someone I barely recognized. But she'd failed in her ultimate goal. She'd failed to destroy me. I was free now, truly free for the first time in years. Free from the weight of their expectations, free from the pain of their rejection, free from the fear of their manipulations. And most importantly, I was free to build new relationships, real relationships with people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide. The house Jessica had coveted so desperately was gone, sold to a young family who would fill it with love and laughter. The money she'd schemed to steal was safely invested in my future, my security, my peace of mind. But the best part, the most perfect irony of all, was that in trying to take everything from me, she'd given me the greatest gift imaginable. She'd set me free.